Hello everyone! In today's video, we'll connect an IoT device, a Raspberry Pi in our case, to AWS's ecosystem, IoT Core to be specific. So in this video, first we'll look at an introduction to all the technologies we'll use in today's video, including AWS Iot Core, Internet of Things, and MQTT. Then we'll look at the architecture of today's demo. And also, we'll take a peek at all the steps we need to take in order to connect an IoT device, otherwise known as a thing. Finally, we'll get on to the interactive demo, in which we'll connect Raspberry Pi to AWS Iot Core and send messages back and forth. So let's look at the introduction. First, we'll talk about IoT. So IoT, or Internet of Things, is a system of a bunch of devices working in conjunction with each other. All of the device and the sensors can kind of talk to the cloud through some kind of connectivity. In today's video, we'll use our IoT device, which is the Raspberry Pi, and make it talk to AWS Iot Core service. So AWS Iot Core is a cloud service provided by Amazon's cloud ecosystem, and it lets you easily interact with connected devices. It's scalable, as with most cloud services, because it can support billions and even trillions of messages. The AWS IoT Message Broker implementation is based on MQTT, so let's see what that is. MQTT stands for Message Queuing Telemetry Transport, and it's a lightweight messaging protocol used in AWS Iot Core to interact with other devices, which in this case is the Raspberry Pi. So let's see how it actually works. So MQTT would be the broker in this case, and input devices, or devices that can give an input, would publish data to the broker, or MQTT. Then output devices, or input and output devices, will subscribe to a certain topic in the broker, and in return, the broker, or MQTT, would publish data to the output device or the input-output device. Here's an example. Temperature sensor could send out temperature data to the broker, or MQTT, and the Nest thermostat that has subscribed to the service uses this information to turn on or off based on the temperature. Another implementation could be a GPS location tracker. That can tell Nest if the owner is inside the house or outside, and based on that, Nest can also take a decision of turning on or off the AC unit. A motion detection sensor right here publishes information to the MQTT broker that motion was detected, and a CCTV camera can start recording the video footage. And finally, a soil moisture detection sensor can publish moisture data to MQTT broker, and the sprinkler will subscribe to that topic, and that'll take action as needed. Alright, let's see the architecture of today's demo. So we'll configure AWS Iot Core to create new certificates and attach policies to them so that anonymous users will be able to access Iot Core with the right certificates. Then we'll copy the certificates onto our Raspberry Pi and write a small Python program that publishes messages as well as reads the messages. Finally, it can also subscribe to the messages and read them too. So ideally, we should be sending actual data, such as temperature sensor data, but in this video, we'll send a simple text message back and forth. And the last thing we'll do before the demo is check out what steps we have to take in order to successfully connect our AWS Iot Core to Raspberry Pi. Every input-output IoT device is called a thing, and we have to register all the things. Then we can download our Iot Core certificates onto the Raspberry Pi. We then need to configure a Cognito to allow anonymous users with certificates. Then, we'll create and associate some policies. After that, we'll make a Python program to connect these two. And finally, we'll subscribe to all the topics and publish messages with our Python program. So let's implement these steps. So the first thing we're going to do is register an Iot Core thing, which is the Raspberry Pi in this case. So I'll go to my AWS Iot Core, and let me sign into my console. And okay, so here it is, Iot Core, and it'll redirect me to AWS Iot. So here I can register an IoT thing. So I'll go to Manage and go to Things. And I'm going to press Register a thing because we want to register a new one. If you're making a product and you want to apply the same certificates to hundreds of different devices, you can bulk register many AWS IoT things, but I'm only going to register one Raspberry Pi, so I'll say create a single thing. And now you can add your device to the thing registry. So I'll call mine Raspberry Pi because I'm using the Raspberry Pi. And pretty much everything you can just keep default, and I'll press next. I'm just going to use the one-click certificate creation, so I'm just going to press create certificate. And we need to download all of these, the public key, the private key, and just the regular certificate for this thing. So I'll press download, then download, download. And the last thing you'll need to download is a root CA for AWS IoT. Since it uses SSL, we'll need to securely connect Raspberry Pi to AWS IoT. So I'll just press download here. And this has changed in the last year. So it takes us to our Amazon documentation. And since I'm using Amazon Trust Services, I'm going to download this one. So I'll click it. So here we have our root CA certificate, and I can just say file and then save page as, and it'll save it as a certificate file for us. So I'll go to my correct folder, Raspberry Files, here we go, and I'll call it root-ca.pem. Not pem, okay. Now let's save it, and then it just saves it for us. And since I need to copy these 3 files into my right folder, I'll just say show in Finder, and that'll open up the folder for me. So here we have our keys. So I'll just select this and then copy them, and then I'll just paste them into my folder. And here, it copied both of them, but it's missing one. It has the keys, it just needs the certificate. So I'll open this in Finder also. And I believe it shows it here, yes. We'll copy this and we'll paste it into here. Okay, so now we can rename all these files. So I'll just take out the device ID of these so that it looks a bit nicer. Here we'll just take that out and it'll just be public and private.pem.key. Okay. And this is optional, I'm just taking it out so that it's easier for us later on. Now we'll want to take these local files and push them to our Raspberry Pi. And to do that, I'm going to use FileZilla. Here we go. FileZilla is an FTP client, and it helps you upload and download files from one server to another. In this case, it's our MacBook to the Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to connect to my Raspberry Pi. I've already configured all the details. So I'm just going to press connect, and it's connecting to my Raspberry Pi. Alright, now it connected to our Raspberry Pi. So I'm just going to drag over the files, but first I want to create a new directory in my Raspberry Pi. So I'll right click and say create directory, and the directory name is going to be AWS Iot. And then I'll press OK, so it creates our directory. Now I just have to go into that folder. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I'll double click to go inside. And here, we're in the folder now. So now I can take my files, all these 4 files. So I'll just select them and then drag them over into here. And there, it transferred into our Raspberry Pi. Okay, that worked. Alright, so we've completed steps 1 through 3. Now we have to create a Cognito and associate policies. So let's do it. Alright, so I'll go back to AWS, and I'm actually going to create a policy first because we have to associate some stuff. So I'll go to Secure and Policies, and right now I don't have any, so I'll create a policy. For the name, it can be anything. I'll just call it Raspberry Pi Policy. And actions will just tell what kind of actions the policy can do. For example, publish or subscribe to a topic. If I wanted to, I could just individually say publish and subscribe, but I'll say IoT:*. That'll just say it can do anything and everything. And it creates an ARN for us. So instead of just doing one specific ARN, I'm going to give it access to anything by saying star. And then for effect, I'll say allow, and now we can create our policy. And here it shows us we created our policy. So we've created a policy, but now I need to associate it with my certificate and associate this certificate to my thing, which is the Raspberry Pi. So I'll go to certificates, and here we have our certificates. So I'll right click and say attach policy. Here we can attach our created policy, which is Raspberry Pi policy, and I'll press attach. And we also want to attach a thing to it, which is our Raspberry Pi device. So I'll press attach, and yes, now it's connected to our policy and our IoT device. And now before creating a Cognito, I'm going to activate my certificate. So now it's activated, and now we can create a Cognito. So how I'm going to do that is by going to Services and Cognito. So I'll just search it right here. So I'll open it in a new tab, and it'll take us to our Amazon Cognito. Here we're going to manage our identity pools and create a new federated identity. So I'll press Create New Identity Pool, and for the name, I'll call it AWS Identity Pool. Okay, and I'm just going to enable access to unauthenticated identities, and everything else should be default. So I'll just press Create Pool, and it's creating it for us. Okay, so we can view the details, and what I'm going to do is for the role summary, the bottom one, I'm going to view the policy document, and here it shows us the policy. Now, I want to add the resource ARN of my thing, so I'll press edit, and I'll just press OK. So now we can edit it, and here in the resource, we'll add the ARN. So I'm going to go back to AWS Iot, and I'll go to my things, and we can see the ARN here. We just click it, and then here's the ARN. We'll just copy all the way till Raspberry Pi. There we go. And I'll go back here, and inside resource, we'll paste it. Yeah. Now we can press allow, and it'll create it for us. It says successful, and now we can just go back to AWS Iot and continue. Alright, so we've associated our policy and created a Cognito. Now we're going to create a Python program to subscribe to a topic and publish data. So this is the page that I kind of used as the skeleton for my Python program. It's just Amazon's documentation on a little Python program with MQTT and an AWS Iot. So here's kind of the most of the code that I'm going to use. And yeah, let's remote into our Raspberry Pi now so that we can code it. So here's my VNC viewer, and I'm going to remote into my Raspberry Pi. Okay, so it's asking me for a password, so I'll just enter it in. And here, now we have a Raspberry Pi. And I've already created a file here, AWS Iot core.py, and I'll show you the folder structure. So in home/pi, I have a folder called AWS Iot, and inside of that, I have all of the certificates and my Python program. Alright, so first I'll paste in the imports. We're just importing time and the AWS Iot MQTT client. Alright, now I'm going to paste in the rest of this code. So here, this might look a little intimidating, but it's easy once you think about it. So here we're just connecting to a client. This is just a random key. I just called it Rishab client ID, but you can really call it whatever you want. So here we're configuring the endpoint. This is the default port number for ATS, and we actually have to configure the endpoint. So what I'll do is I'll go to AWS Iot to get the endpoint. So I'll go here, and it's in settings. So I'll go to settings, and here we have our endpoint. So I'll just copy this, and I'll put it in my code. Here now we have the endpoint, and now we're configuring the credentials. Here we have our root CA permission file, and the private key, and the certificate file. So let me go to the folder to show you. Here we have the private key, the root CA permission file, and the certificate file. We're using all these in our Python code. So let's go back. And All of this is just trying to connect to the AWS Iot Core, and then it's just printing initiating Iot Core topic, and it's connecting. If all of this gets done correctly, then it'll connect to my MQTT. So now I want to subscribe to a topic. How I'm going to do that is I said my MQTT client dot, which is a variable we defined up here. So I'm going to say that again, my MQTT client dot, and then subscribe, because we want to subscribe to a certain topic. Subscribe. And then in that, we can define the topic. I'll say home/hello world. I'll just call the topic hello world. We didn't define a topic yet, but we will in a bit. And then I'm going to pass in some more parameters. I'll add 1 and hello world, which is a function we'll define in a second. Hello world. Okay, so now let's define that hello world function. So I'll put it at the top because we're defining it down here. Because we're mentioning it down there, sorry. So here I'll paste it in. And here it is. So we're defining hello world with these parameters, and then we're printing received message from AWS Iot Core. This is optional. And then we're printing the topic and the payload, which is the actual messages that was received from AWS Iot Core. Alright, now this code is ready to run. So I'll go to terminal to run our code. And first I need to get into the desired directory. Alright, now we can run our code. You might need to install a few packages and modules, but I've already done all that. So I'll just say python 3 AWS Iot Core .py. Let me just check if that's the correct file name. Yep. Okay. Here we go. Let's run it. Okay, it's saying initiating Iot Core topic, and then it just stopped the program. Alright, it stopped because we didn't add a loop to wait. It just stops the program after printing that. So let's create a loop. I'll go back to my Python code and let's edit this. Alright, so after all of this, we can create a while loop. I'll just paste this in. It's saying while true, time.sleep for 5 seconds. And wait, I indented this. Okay. There we go. Now we can save this and let's run it again. Now it'll just keep waiting and it'll have a 5-second break in between. So let's just run that code again. And now it's saying initiating Iot Core topic, and then it's just waiting. That's because we didn't publish anything to Iot Core yet. So let's do that. So I've just resized my screen so that we can publish some data and see it on both screens. So in AWS Iot Core, I'll just go to test. And here we want to publish to a topic. So the topic we specified in my Python code was home/hello world. So we're just going to keep that topic. And the message should be hello from AWS Iot console. You can make the message anything you want, but I'm just going to keep it default. And now I'll press publish to topic. It says published, and here we go. Almost instantaneously, it showed the topic and it shows the payload. It's saying message is hello from AWS Iot console. Okay, that worked perfectly. So in this example, we just printed a hello world message, but in real life projects, we would actually be doing some actions such as turning on an AC or a motor or something like that. I'm not going to get too deep into it. And we also published a message from Iot Core, and it printed it here in a Raspberry Pi. Now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to publish it from Raspberry Pi, and it should print it in Iot Core. Alright, let's do that. Alright, so first I'll stop this program, and then I'm going to go to my code here. And now I want to publish the data to AWS Iot Core. So I'm just going to comment out this. And I'm also going to comment out this line because I don't want the Raspberry Pi to subscribe to AWS Iot Core. I want the opposite to happen. now we can write our code for publishing. So just so that I know it's publishing some data, I'm going to say print and publishing message from RPI, which is Raspberry Pi. That's just so that I know it's publishing. And now I can say, just like I said, my MQTT client dot subscribe, I can say the same for publish. My MQTT client dot publish. And then the parameters. So inside here, I'll just paste this in here. Here, this indentation is wrong. Give me a second. Okay, so the first one is the topic. Again, it's home/hello world. And then this is the quality of service. If you want to change it, you can check out some documentation. I'm going to keep it as 1. And the payload is, again, this is just the message. This is in simple JSON format. For the message, I'll say message by RPI. And if you want, you could add more parameters like some sensor data or something like that, but I'm just going to keep it simple. So now we can save it, and that should be it. Okay, so I've cleared my screen, and I've again positioned these tabs. And again, I've positioned these windows so that I can see both of them. And before running our program, I'm going to have to, just like I subscribed to AWS Iot Core from the Raspberry Pi, I'm going to have to subscribe to the Raspberry Pi from AWS Iot. So I'm going to say subscribe to a topic up here and home/hello world. I'll press subscribe, and here it's subscribe to our topic. Now we can run our program. So Python 3 AWS Iot Core.py. Oh, it's giving us an error. Let me check the code. And oh yeah, here there's an extra bracket. Whoops. Okay, let's save that, and now we can run it again. Now it should work. Okay. It's saying initiating, and here it shows the message. Message is message by RPI, which is what we specified in the code. And it also said publishing message from RPI. Okay, that worked. Great. We successfully published messages back and forth from AWS Iot Core service and our Raspberry Pi using subscription topics. In this video, we sent a simple message back and forth to Iot Core from our Raspberry Pi, and real projects could have multiple sensor data published through different topics, and event-based actions could be taken by various subscriber devices, such as turning AC on if the temperature is too high. I'll also post this code on one of my GitHub repositories. Check it out if you want to download this code. Thanks very much for watching. If you all had any doubts, please comment down below. I would love to help you out if you're stuck with any Iot Core or Raspberry Pi questions or issues. Please like, subscribe, all that jazz. Until then, you can learn anything.